welcome back. I'm Kari Wilson, Communications Director here at Two Cities, here as always with Pastor Kyle. And we have just the privilege today of talking about our Hold the Rope offering. This is an offering, Kyle, that we have every year. I'm trying to think, did we have it the first year or
we
did
didn't?
it start?
I'm trying to think back to the exact. We've been doing this, so we're 8 years old. So we've been doing this, I would say, safely for at least 5 years. Maybe 6.
More. I feel like more like 6.
Maybe we didn't do it the first year. That's the tension of being a very young church plant. You want to be as generous as you can, and but you're also trying to meet your basic needs.
Yeah.
But basically, so it comes out of a couple different things. It comes out of one, just the biblical teaching that there's tithes and there's offerings. Okay, and so as I've taught for years now, the tithe is not just 10%; it's your first 10%. And in the Bible talks about tithes and offerings. And offerings is above and beyond what you would normally give. And so one of the things that we just said is, what people are uniquely generous for many reasons. At the end of the year, it's the largest time where people are going to give, whether it's to your general fund or everybody is probably sending you and me and everybody else flyers and emails and all this kind of, hey, could you give at the end of the year? And so we just thought, what could we do something that was, and this is key, 100% outside of our church for our local, national, global partners. We went back and forth. It's like when you're designing anything. We thought,
why did you call it
Hold the Rope? I tell this story every year, but there's this famous missionary and Hudson Taylor, and he's going to India. And basically, back then, going to India, it's hard to go to India now, but going back to India, or maybe it was China, I'm trying to remember the details of it, doesn't matter. Either way, he was going really far away. And back then, you get on a boat, you actually pack your coffin, usually, and you never come back. It's just like, it's intense. I know it's very intense, but that would often happen. And you say goodbye to your family, you're not FaceTiming them when you get there. And so he's like, I got to go to India. And his whole thing was, it's a deep well. He's telling his friend, I believe it was Andrew Fuller, and he says, it's a deep well. I will go down into the well if you will hold the rope. And basically, he challenged his friend Andrew Fuller to say, I'm going to do the Great Commission work of crossing an ocean, learning a language, all that kind of stuff, which we can talk about that. But basically, he said to Andrew Fuller, if I'm going to do that, I need you to hold the rope. And what he meant is, and Andrew Fuller, which his best friend did this, I need you to raise money for me the rest of your life. And so Andrew Fuller, because what happens to missionaries is they're forgotten. We don't want to forget them, but we're busy and life's full. And so you need, and I look at it as one of my roles as a lead pastor, as a teaching pastor, that I've got to keep in front of people, all of the people who, I think it's 3 John said, went out for the sake of his name. And so it's like people go out, they raise money, they become like a child again. Missionaries are my heroes. Hold the Rope is for local, national, and global. When I think of global missionaries who literally have to become like a child again, they have to learn a language, they have to adapt to a culture. They're raising their kids apart from the grandkids. they're doing so. They're often in areas that we're not even allowed to say where they are. And so to me, it's like, we want to support them. We've always said we want to be a shepherding, and a sending, and a supporting church. All 3 of those. And so to me, Hold the Rope is where what would be the right word? We uniquely infuse our missionary partners and often unique, strategic, current needs with an influx of money. And this is a shallow word, but it's a lot of fun in the sense that one of my favorite parts is to call and I'm not the only one who does, many people on our staff, because we have lots of partners, we call the partners, kind of the end goal is we're calling the partners in early January saying, hey, it's 2025. We love you. God loves you. Here's a bunch of money that's going to help you go further, faster. And it's not uncommon. People are crying, all that kind of stuff. So here's what we do. At the end of every year, it's usually right around Thanksgiving and to the end of the year, we want to give our church an opportunity to give above and beyond their normal tithe. It's going to go 100% outside of our church. And we normally we give to dozens of organizations, but we will normally highlight anywhere from 3 to 6, sometimes even 9. Yeah. Hey, here are some major partners, some major needs. We'll shoot some videos, but it's to catalyze our people in a unique way for generosity. And what I'm amazed at is people love it. I shouldn't be amazed. I'm just saying, but people look forward to it. People want to know who our partners are.
We've already had some people trying to give.
I believe
we haven't even announced it yet, so that's pretty encouraging.
So, what you have is you've got, I don't even know what we did the first year when we did this, how much we brought in. But I think this last year, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in 2023, at the end of the year, I think we gave close to $1 million away.
It was very close. It was
Which
very
we already
close.
are. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back, but we already are a church that our church is, by God's grace, very generous. So we're already giving, partnering monthly, meeting needs as they come up.
On top of this,
and then on top of it, here's another $1 million.
That's great. Well, and you mentioned this briefly earlier, but young church plants are often concerned more with raising support and funds to help their church fully function. Really, in a lot of ways, we were blessed early on to very quickly become self-sustaining as a church plant. But during that early period where we were still trying to establish in those sorts of ways, why hold the rope? Why so soon in the life of our church? Why did you and Pastor Dave and others that were involved feel like it was the right move?
I mean, I think I don't want to be cheesy here. I think we're blessed to be a blessing. We felt very much like, man, our needs are met. And of course, any growing church has continual needs. Among them are financial,
Yeah.
But we just felt like, man, I think we've got, and then honestly, part of my temperament, Pastor Dave's like this, Pastor Caleb's like this, really all of our pastors like this, and our staff's like this. I am a pastor to pastors. I love pastors. I love to invest in pastors. I believe in pastors. Missionaries are my heroes. I'm a classic Baptist in that sense. I'm like, man, I think missionaries are the greatest people on earth. And I want to honor them as much as I possibly can. So I think it came out of that. What happens, when you're I say this humbly, I hope, but when you're a fruitful, successful church plant, you're not a church plant for very long. I mean, we were like in year 2, we're like, I don't think we can call ourselves a church plant. We're like 600 people. I don't think we can call ourselves a church plant. And so, what starts to happen is people start to come up to you and they start to say, "Hey, we want to learn from you," and they want to start, "Hey, can we come to your weekender?" Hey, and you build these relationships, and then you're like, "Man, this guy's like a brother in Christ to me. He's like a son in the faith to me," and you start wanting to say, "Man, I think we could really help him," and needs come across your desk, and you go, "Well, man, maybe we could help them get into their first." Facility or something like that. So really, to us, it just happened. We were an established church early. Our needs were met, and we started to think, and we started to have people come to us saying, "We want to plant churches. We want to go overseas." I mean, even the way that one of our, I don't know if I can name them by name on this podcast, but our first family that came, you know who I'm talking about. But anyway, our first family that we sent overseas, they came to us, and they were like, "Here's what God's doing. Here's our heart." And we're like, "Okay." And so we began to see needs and try to respond appropriately.
Yeah, no, that's great. With that first year, were you surprised at all with the response of our church?
Yes, I would say, in one sense, I'm surprised every year, but now I'm becoming less surprised. I don't want to take anything for granted. I don't. The grace of God in our church, the generosity of our people. But yeah, we're just a church in which, we gave away more to hold the rope. Now, we've grown a ton, but we gave away more to hold the rope last year than we raised in our first initiative to get into our Northwest Boulevard, which is now our student center. You know all this, but so I have just been amazed. I've been amazed that in 6 weeks, people will give, and I don't know what's going to come in this year. We don't we don't set a goal. That. We just kind of say, hey, 100% participation. What is God going to, and we hear stories because this is the same time of year where people are getting their end of year bonus or whatever. And they're deciding, what are we going to do? And okay, we want to give to this. And then what's interesting too, and this is just a side note, I'm trying to raise the temperature of people's hearts, especially for our nation, but for the nations. What people much older than me are telling me is that the people behind so much of the funding and fueling of world missions, global missions, are builders and boomers. And the builders are almost all passing. And the boomers are getting old now. And it's really time for the next generations to kind of pick up the mantle of world missions and go, if we don't fund this, who else is going to?
That's so good. So good. And we really have seen such a strong response, I feel, from our church over the years. Like I said, we've already had people that have wanted to donate and have been allowed to go ahead and donate this year. And Hold the Rope, obviously, we're able to, and I want to talk about this in a second, come alongside our local, national, and global partners and really help them to take the gospel to all of their contexts. But it's had an impact on the people of our church as well. How have you seen this Hold the Rope offering affect the people of our church?
Well, I mean, Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart is. And so I think if people are like, man, I'd love to, and I don't say this to manipulate people, but if you're like, I would like a heart more for the nations than give to the nations. I think where you're, in one level, yes, your money goes where your heart is, but your heart goes where your money is. And so I think it connects, it ties people's hearts to the nations through generosity. It's one of the things that happens. It's the same way we're always thinking, how do we connect people's hearts to the nations? And there's not that many ways. I mean, here's 3 of them. Short-term mission trips, that connects people's hearts to the nations. Compassion, which we'll talk about at some point again. But years ago we did a compassion. We're going to eventually do it again. Compassion weekends through child sponsorship attaches people's hearts to the nations. And then I would say our Hold the Rope is this, and I'm trying to grow, you and I have had conversations with this, I'm trying to grow as a teacher, preacher of God's Word to go, how do I keep the nations?
That's good.
And so to me, it's keeping the nations in front of everybody. If we're going to, so how does this fit with the Multiply series? Well, to me, it's like what I said at the end of my Genesis 11 sermon. We cannot, we need to multiply so that we can one day see the great multitude. So I just think we have to have a global vision. Like it is so important. I know you know this. I'm not saying this to you, but our church needs to have a global vision. And it's easy to get myopic. I mean, and it's interesting. The reason, and this would be worth talking about, I think it's very important to keep local, national, and global. Now, in one sense, those are a little arbitrary terms that we're trying to use elastically to talk about different areas. That comes from Acts 1:8, obviously. You will be my witnesses in Judea, Samaria, ends of the earth. We could have broken it up more. We could say local. We could say regional. We could do different things. State, all that. But we just said local, national, global. Those are 3 categories. And I think what's happening is there's always a temptation. I'm not trying to call out any one church. Because we have our own proclivities. There's always a temptation for churches to just focus on one of those 3. There are a lot of like the classic old school Baptist church reaches the world and loses their city.
That's good.
I'm not picking on them. It happens. You'll meet a Baptist church and they have not seen a baptism in their church in 20 years. But they have 45 missionaries all over the world, and praise God for that. It could be a temptation to just love your city and forget the world. We're trying to do all 3. And for us, the primary way that we're going to do the second 2, we can talk about each one of these, but the primary way we're going to do national and global ministry is the planting of healthy churches. I don't know how else to do it. I'm okay, and not just okay, I'm enthusiastic about the right Christian nonprofits doing something in Africa. I'm much more excited about healthy local churches that ultimately, because the goal of world missions is indigenous leadership, local leadership. Like that is, when we send a missionaries, like the average missionary doesn't necessarily want to be in northern Africa for the next 40 years.
They want to raise up nationals there to take their place because they're going to be way more effective than they ever could be.
Way more effective. And so you need to, so basically that's what we're about. Locally, we get more creative because we are a church here. We want to do church planting in our own city. But when we think nationally and globally, the primary thing that we're doing is either planting churches or helping establish missionaries and church planters strengthen their churches there.
Well, I think locally it's just helped us to build a lot of important relationships and to have a lot of favor in the city to where there's doors that are open that wouldn't be open otherwise. And, we've talked about this before, the fact that we have a good number of our homeless community that come to church and worship with us on Sundays because we have such strong relationships with a lot of the organizations who are coming alongside them, and we're able to direct them to them because of that. Not only do we know of the resources, but we're supporting those resources.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting. So at the Weekender, which we do 9 times a year, I always ask, this, but I ask these 2 questions, why did you come? Why did you come back? And I get a lot of the same answers. Why did you come? Well, I saw it online, or a friend invited me, or blah, blah, blah. And then, and then why did you come back? I get a lot of the same answers. But recently I can't remember, I think this was 2 weekenders ago. I was talking to some lady, said, why did you come back? She said, the way this church treats the poor.
Wow.
I thought, praise God. I've never heard that before. And that's what I'd like to be known for that. I mean, we should, they tell the Apostle Paul, I think it's Peter who says to the Apostle Paul, don't forget the poor. And so we care for the poor. I think that that we primarily, I don't want to just say what I always say, but we primarily partner with organizations. We have so many great organizations in our city. We don't feel a need, at least right now, to try to start any other nonprofit in our city. It's like, man, when it comes to the basic needs, the spiritual and temporal needs of our city, we have a legacy from the Moravians on of strong Christian witness. And so what we basically do uniquely is we have a relationship with all these nonprofits throughout the year. Primarily, shout out to Austin Needham, who you and I love.
Yes.
And his tireless work. He is basically, the image in my mind of Austin Needham on our staff is, he is literally, his back, in the best sense of the word, his back is to our church and his face is to the city. And he is the primary connection point. I can go to him at any day and say, and I do occasionally, hey, Austin, what's going on at Samaritan's Ministry? And boom, here's what's going on. Here's their needs. And so Bethesda Center, Crisis Control, I'm just thinking of even our local partners here. And so we're uniquely going, okay, that's what's going on there. And we have enough relationship that we're not randomly asking people in November what the needs are. We are aware of the needs in our city.
That's good.
And we try to respond.
You know what I feel like I've seen the past several years is that especially, I know we're spending a little bit talking about local here, with those local partners, when we share those with our church, then the next year seeing our community groups coming alongside some of those same groups because they've been exposed to the mission of what they're doing and they already feel invested through Hold the Rope.
Yes.
Back in the day, it's like the first time a lot of people heard of City Lights ministry, and then we had community groups serving there.
Yes.
We have a lot of community groups that serve with the rescue mission and other places like that in our city, or Pregnancy Network or Salem Pregnancy, these places that they might not have known about otherwise if we not put them before them. And not only are we saying, hey, we want to raise funds to support these people, but we're getting to celebrate the stories of what they're doing and what they've been able to do through Hold the Rope. And I just feel like that is so key. We don't just want to send money to all these different places and these people. We want to see what God is doing through the fruit of that generosity and sacrifice. And it really is a sacrifice for some of our people.
I mean, and I think another principle that I just want to remind everyone listening to is, one of the reasons we come alongside nonprofits is there's a principle in Scripture that people should live off of. Like, a ministry should be supported. In general, the principle is, you minister to people, and they support that ministry. That's the principle of Scripture. But sometimes that principle does not work when you're ministering to the poorest of the poor, or you're doing world missions in an area. It's like, well, there's no believers here. Well, so they're not going to support the ministry. Yeah. Well, how long will it take you to, evangelize people, disciple them, establish them in their faith, equip leaders, and give autonomous leadership? Well, 15 years. Okay, well, then we'll support you until then. And so I think that's what we're looking at certain ministries going, you're ministering to the poorest of the poor. And this ministry, there are ministries in our city, and I love them, and I don't mean this as a critique. They will never be self-sustaining, but they're doing a great ministry, and so we want to come alongside them. Someone told me, I don't know if this is true, I heard this, that Tim Keller's church was never self-sustaining. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
No.
And the reason is he was doing ministry in New York City. And he was doing, think about it, he was doing ministry in Manhattan, and he had a unique ministry to the seeker and the skeptic. So it's like, well, how are you going to afford that? It's like, well, you had to have other people outside of it go, all right, I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm an early adopter, and I'm going to give generously to this.
That's so good. And I'm thinking about our different categories. We talked about local. Even with national, I feel like the first time people heard about some of these church plants that we were coming alongside of, some of them who hadn't even officially launched yet, we saw people over the past several years out of our church go and follow those church plants and be a part of their launch teams. And had we not had them a part of the Hold the Rope offering and been raising financial support for them, those people in our church may never have known of those opportunities, and their hearts may not have been attached to those opportunities. So I think there's lots of neat ways that we've been able to see Hold the Rope not only impact these organizations, but impact our people and 100%. Our church in turn as well. How have you seen families use this as an opportunity for discipleship in their homes?
Well, I mean, I think, this is the bigger, well, maybe, I'm not sure all the reasons or all the ways that families do it. I think ways families could do it is, and this is, families need to figure out how they're going to talk about this, but I think families saying, hey, you know what, mom and dad are excited about this. We're going to give to this. We've had, of course, really sweet, maybe you know what I'm going to say, but we've seen, Pastor Dave does a great job highlighting these. A lot of times it's like, man, could the kids give something? We every time we've done a financial initiative, we've only done 2 of those.
Yeah.
But we've always said, hey, get your kids invested and involved. If they give $1 or a dime, it's gonna do something to their heart. And so I think that happens. I think it's an opportunity to, again, put the world in front of our children and go, hey guys, and honestly, like I say this all the time, but like have our kids have a sense of adventure and mission. Hey guys, there's these families just like our family, and they live in a place far away from here, and they're trying to tell people about Jesus. And we have an opportunity, and you get real specific. I think specificity, breeds intimacy, and in the sense of, I think you say, I try to in highlighting world missions, I try to say as much, if I'm allowed, as much as I can about what this money will do for people. So, hey, example, but I think this happened one time, something like this. Hey, in India, they're trying to get Bibles up to this area. Yeah. It's very hard. And guys, our church is going to buy them 2 motorcycles. An 8-year-old boy is like, this is the coolest thing ever. There's people delivering, smuggling God's word. I want to be a part of that. Yes. You're like, that's what Christians do. Christians are not just people who don't do things. I mean, that's what, that's the young people, as they get older, they think Christianity is about what I don't do. No, guys, there are people all over the world. So I think it's a chance for people to highlight missions, as well as to invite their kids into this and say, guys, what if we each gave something? And
we've had kids do lemonade stands or like
that's a great allowance. Go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, like multiple families in our church getting together and doing things like yard sales and lemonade stands, and their kids are the primary ones that are wanting to do it, that are like driving this action.
To take all that money and then to give it hold rope.
Yeah, to give all of it
I love
away.
it.
And how hard is that for a little child to like see the money that they made and then to give it all away? But what a beautiful experience. And they're so excited too to be able to drop that in the little black boxes as they exit the kids ministry. There's a place for them to turn in their offering. And we see the sweetest stuff in there, right? Like little pictures that people have drawn and notes that they've written about why they want to give the money. And these kids, they're getting it. They're learning about generosity and they're learning about the world at a young age. And we're fostering that in their hearts. And it's just so sweet to see how it grows.
And I think what I've seen at our church is the upside down nature of the gospel, which, in other words, the more that we highlight missions and call people to generosity, the more the more that they're just generous in every other area. It's like, I think if I could just speak to pastors, I think sometimes pastors are afraid to do this. Because they're afraid to do it because it's like, well, hold on, we have needs. Hold on. If they're gonna get, it tends to be what we talk about, the scarcity versus abundance mindset, or the zero sum game. Hold on, if they give to that, then they won't give. It's like we have just seen. I just want to honor our church. We have just seen a continuous generosity in both directions. We have seen. If any pastors are listening, I just want to say we have seen it only bless and increase the total generosity, the total generous mindset of our church as we put things in front of people.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't taken away from like offering at all. It's all like a surplus on top of that. And I know I'm amazed every year as the number grows and grows, and I feel like I'm always surprised. I still haven't gotten to the point of not being surprised, so maybe I'll get there eventually. But I know uniquely you, Pastor Kyle, feel called to give to these offerings first and to communicate how you're thinking about that and how your family is praying and thinking about that. How have you and your family navigated how much should we give each year? Like what conversations are you having? How are you praying?
Yeah, it's great. Well, one, I mean, definitely want to involve the kids, as we've talked about, so I won't repeat that whole section. I do think that's a key moment just to say, hey, this is something. Again, you want to, as your kids get jobs, you want to have them give generally to the tithes of the church. But I think this is an opportunity. For me, it's you're exactly right. I have to kind of go, okay, what am I going to do? I think for me, I'm always trying to, I don't want to put this on somebody else. I think, but as the person who's casting the vision, I would always like to give more than I gave the year before. And that the more years we do that, the harder that is. You know what I'm saying? No, I mean, it's a joy, but you know what I'm saying? To go, okay, I'm going to raise the temperature up and go, okay, if I gave X last year, I want to give not $1 more than that. I want to give generously. I want to think, what could we give to really, make a difference in this? So I mean, I don't know that it's a super. I don't want to make it sound more spiritual or a longer process than it is, but it's certainly something that Margie and I talk about in light of end of the year, other give. Because like most of our listeners here, I'm sure. There's lots of things you get invited to at the end of the year. There's lots of
banquets.
A lot, and I believe in all that. I'm saying there's lots of things. Okay, what is good stewardship for us to be able to give generously to multiple of these things? Yeah.
Well, no, I think what's so cool for the people of our church is a lot of times they know that we are investing in those things, that they are investing in those things through their consistent generosity, and they're able to trust us with their offerings.
Yes.
To the point where, and this is outside of the hold the rope, but I just think about with everything that's been happening in Western North Carolina, the fact that you guys were able to make a decision quickly that we're going to give $25,000, and that's just the beginning to this effort immediately. Like we want to be feet on the ground, we want to help however we can. Financially has been one of the main ways they've encouraged people to consider being a part of it, and we were able to do that because our people, they get it. They trust the Lord and they trust the church with what they're giving. And I think that's just really beautiful. I want to talk about even some maybe stories we've heard or experiences that we've seen. I think about the parable of the poor widow. I was thinking about this as I was preparing earlier, and her 2 small coins, right? And giving out of her poverty, like not out of her abundance. How have we seen this in our church? Like people really making sacrifices to be able to give to things like Hold the Rope.
Yeah. And well, let me just say to begin with, it's hard because we never know. We don't know most of the stories.
Yeah.
It's hard to go. Every once in a while you'll hear a story. So because someone will, I don't know. I try not to go looking for them, but every once in a while someone will email me.
Write a
letter. This probably
Yeah.
happened more during our 2 financial initiatives, where it's just like, hey guys, this is unique. We're going to spend 6 weeks. We're headed somewhere into the future.
Yeah.
It's normally there that I would probably have more of the memorable stories. But you will hear stories every once in a while where a couple will say, hey, right around Christmas time, we hadn't heard about Hold the Rope. This is our first year here. We're going to, it's something usually like take part of what we were going to do for Christmas for each other or whatever. We want to give generously to it. Have you heard any unique stories?
I'm trying to remember if this was Hold the Rope or something else. For some reason, I think it was Hold the Rope because of the time of the year we were at, but I could be wrong. Still a great story. Just a single mom who just gave generously and a sacrificial gift and had written a note, I think, just explaining why she was giving it. And you told that story. It might have been during.
I think it was the Ford initiative. I know what you're talking about. No, and that's
we get things
yes,
like this,
no, but you're exactly right. In that story, if we remember real quick, it was a mom. I think it was $250. Single mom writes this letter and basically says, "Hey, I want to give $250. Here's why. And I'm going to trust the Lord." And then you find out later. I share that story, and you find out later that encourages some other people who had a larger capacity to, yes. And so I think the church encourages itself. So
and not only to give like larger gifts to the church, but in turn, I remember I got to deliver to that mom.
Oh, that's a crazy story. Go ahead.
I got to
deliver.
Tell that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was 10 times the amount that she had given. Just about. It was crazy, and got to deliver that and just see just her light up and her appreciation.
Yeah, you're basically telling a story that, like, I don't know that we've ever told, but you're basically telling a story. Yeah, basically somebody heard that story and wanted to meet that single mom's unique need. Now, that was not part of the equation. She didn't know that. We don't normally do that.
No.
Or have ever done that. I don't think outside of that. But that was just a unique moment of how God blesses.
I think so.
And I'm not trying to be prosperity gospel, but I think when you put God first, the principal blessing.
Yeah.
When you put God first, God blesses that.
I think so.
And I don't know. We'll know in heaven. I don't know if part of the story of God's blessing on our church is that we have not, as far as we're trying, we've not forgotten the nations. Yeah. We've not forgotten other people. And I think it keeps us, how would I say it? Like, what's the right word? It keeps us grounded.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I'm as excited about, we can get into some of the people, but I'm as excited about some church planter trying to get in his first building, or I'm excited about some missionaries getting something extra that they need so that they can do ministry or their family can function. Like, I'm genuinely as excited about that as I am anything that's happening here.
That's great. Well, tell me this, as you're talking about these different people we're supporting, how do we choose who we support each year? How do you and other elders and pastors that are involved in that process? Like,
well, I mean, without going into too much detail, it's a long process. We talk a lot to, we have a whole missions team. So at any given moment, I'm trying to be as up to date what's going on in missions, but there is just so many partners, there's so many teams, there's so many trips. So somebody like Pastor Spencer, who's over missions. Now you've got Vinny, who's also over missions.
Austin.
You have Austin, who's over the Mercy Ministry. In Mercy Mission locally, and then you have, I won't name them all. Then you have some residents involved, and so there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So we normally gather some of those people, and we sit down and we say, guys, what are we seeing over the last year? Where are people at? This is where this church planter is at. This is where this missionary is at. Sometimes a need just is massive and comes across our, for example, the big partner, one of our biggest partners this year is going to be Western North Carolina. I mean, basically that happened, like you mentioned earlier, we were able to immediately give $25,000. We're humble to do it. We were able to send an 18-wheel truck, up to Boone area, glad to do it. But we pretty much, fairly quickly, maybe even long before Hold the Rope was, needed to know the names. We were like, okay, I cannot see how our biggest partner or one of our biggest partners this year is going to not, how could it not be Western North Carolina? And then the question always is just when you have a need, okay, well, what's the best vehicle to, how do we partner with Samaritan's Purse and, and Baptists on Mission and NC Baptist? And, sometimes that's hard to go, okay, who is the best vehicle? What is the best organization
to
carry out this? Because what you're doing when you're giving, and this is part of what we're doing, our job as pastors and staff, I think, is to basically, without getting weird, vet these organizations and go, okay, we're about to give large amounts of God's money and money that people, hard-earned money that they gave to God's global purposes. We're about to pass often tens of thousands of dollars of that to somebody else. So we've always felt good about exactly what we're doing. But to us, our biggest local, and we say local this year because it's just right down the street in some ways. When you start thinking about Boone, you stretch out to Western North Carolina, to Asheville.
Well, where I grew up is like 2 hours from here, and part of that county, Lake Lure, like Chimney Rock
Yeah.
area, completely devastated.
Well, and
that's
it's
just 2
it's
hours
a
from there.
classic. This is what happens all the time. This is what happens when somebody has a death in the family. Everybody cares for the first couple days, maybe the first couple weeks. We're not saying that we're better than anyone else. There's tons of churches, tons of nonprofits who still care, but a lot of people are like, well, we just now there's the election, now there's Christmas, now there's New Year. It's like it's easy to forget about some needs.
Yeah.
So we also feel like, man, this is a way to. There was an enormous immediate response, rightly so, and now people are still struggling. I can't remember where I read this or heard this, but that parts of 40, Interstate 40, are not going to be done until 2026.
That's like so hard to even grasp.
So you just go, that's the destruction, yet alone these mountain roads, yet alone, churches that need to be put back together. And so there's still a lot of people. And so I want to just honor Biltmore Church in Asheville.
Yes.
They're doing a great job. We've talked to them. We're a sister church of them, connected to them. And so, yeah, but I would say that we're excited to give a big gift to Western North Carolina and to several ministries that are ministering there, and to help them as they head into 2025 together.
That's great. You were talking about a second ago, just like the weight we feel to like vet and make sure we're giving the appropriate amount of money to the appropriate organizations and people. And I know we've had such generosity in the past that you guys have had to say it would be unwise for us to give this amount to this group. Like that's going to be too much for them to immediately be able to know how they can invest it. And so you've added more.
That's
more
right.
Whole
That
Road
happens.
partners.
That happens. Yeah.
And so it's so cool that we even have that problem some years.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious, who are some of the key partners that we're coming alongside this year?
Yeah. So we mentioned locally Western North Carolina. So if we go to nationally, there's Justin. He's planting a church in Wilmington. He's out of Josh Miller's church. He was Josh Miller's executive pastor. So it would be like now they play a little different role, but it'd almost be like if Pastor Dave were to leave to plant a church. I mean, that's what it's like for them. And so Justin, he called us. That's the executive pastor. And said, we'd love to talk to you guys. We're planting, I believe it's called King's Church in Wilmington. It's going to be a great church. And so part of what we do is we said, all right, we're really interested in supporting you, but we want you to come down here. We want to spend half a day with you. We want to, because I don't mean this in a weird way, but we want to have a. You
said you want a partnership.
And that's what they want. But I'm not interested when it comes to church planting in somebody who just says, what JD used to call a teenager, give me your money and don't tell me what to do. It's like, that's not what I want to look at. I know you know that. So I think we're looking for partnerships where it's like, hey, they value the type of church we are. They value our voice and our influence. They're trying to do something that's similar or a version of what we're trying to do. And so to me, Wilmington seems strategic.
Yeah.
It seems like, man, this is, I've had a relation. I don't know Justin as well as I know Josh. I believe in what he's doing. He's going to try to reach, there's a college emphasis because of UNC Wilmington there. So there's a lot of different things. They've got a lot of momentum. So part of the other thing is, in individual Christians need to think about this, and then churches need to think about this. And there's two visions. Well, there's more than two visions or two ways to give. But one way to give is to give the need. And I'm not against that. Sometimes it's just need. Western North Carolina is need in a lot of ways. And I think it's right to do that. I love more to give to vision. Like I just love. So someone told me that, here's a little history lesson. Chuck Smith started the Calvary Chapel movement. One of the most influential pastors in America that's ever lived. I mean, just a great guy. And the whole Calvary Chapel movement. Someone told me who knew him well that rarely would he support a church planter for the first 2 or 3 years. So people would come, nope. And now we do something a little different, but just listen. So he would not support them for the first 2 or 3 years. And he would watch them. And if they began to be fruitful, he would pour a ton of money into them. And it was his principle was like, everybody wants your money early on. Everybody comes to you and goes, this is the most important church. We are heading to the most important city. Here's why you need to partner. And he would just rarely actually come on as an early adopter, but he would be like a proud dad and older brother that would like pour money and invest where he saw. Maybe it's the Henry Blackaby principle. Where is God working? Well, I think we have enough track record with Justin. Yeah. And then Jonathan Lanker, in Harbor City Church.
Well, before we even go there, I think what's so cool about Justin is like the fact that, Josh has been his church has been one of our Whole Road partners in the past. And now to see that church like sending out a church plant, it just feels like we're part of a generational movement.
I agree.
In that. So I just wanted to make note of that.
No, I completely agree. I mean, so yeah, there'll be other people and places we help with, but when it comes to nationally, we're thinking particularly Justin in Wilmington, and then Jonathan Lanker, who's 2 or 3 years in. Do you know?
Is he in Charleston?
Yeah, he's in Charleston. I can't remember how many years in. He's either 2 or 3 years in. Jonathan's a great guy.
Is it Harbor?
Harbor City, and they're trying to get into their first home. And again, it was
First church home.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yes, and that's another interesting thing. I think churches give to what they're passionate about uniquely, and I think our church has, I don't know more than other churches, but we've certainly understood the importance of buildings.
We've seen how God has used it. I mean, we've grown.
Whether it was Goler, Northwest Boulevard, here now. I mean, so I think over the years, I can't even think off the top of my head, a handful of churches at least, where we've been a strategic, catalytic partner to help them get into what I would often call their first real home. And so
Sweet.
and then when you think about places, and this is more and more common, when you think about places like Charleston, you're just like, that is a world city in regards to food and culture and travel. That's going to be a really hard place to find a building for a young church, a smaller church, a starting church.
Yeah.
So we're grateful to come alongside them.
That's great. And then globally, we're also coming alongside some church plants as well, right?
Yep, we're coming along Peter Park, and very excited about his ministry.
In Malaysia?
Yep, in Malaysia. And I love Peter, and he actually was a campus pastor for years at the Summit Church. So we want to come alongside his church, and there's supposedly, I'm trying to get more and more familiar with all that's happening there, but the grace of God is upon that church. It's growing.
That's great.
We want to come alongside them. And were you going to mention something else?
No, and then we're also coming alongside in Kenya, right?
Yep,
There's a
in
church
Kenya,
plant there.
which they just recently had a fire. Do you know about this?
No.
So I don't know all the details on this. Again, this is like, by the time this comes out, we may know more. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but their church building had a fire. So
Oh, man.
now this is a great church. Spence Shelton planted this church in Kenya.
And Spence is at Mercy Church in
I'm
Charlotte.
sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And so, and Spence is a dear friend, partner down there in Charlotte. And so we're I believe we sent one team. Again, this is where I'm trying to keep up with everything. I think we sent one team to Kenya.
I think we have had one
and maybe
team
even
go.
more. I don't know. And so we're beginning in some of these, the financial gift is in some ways, sometimes it's the culmination of a great partnership over years. Sometimes it's the beginning of like, hey guys, we're learning about you.
We love what
you
we
had
see
a
God
fire
doing
at your
here.
church. I'm so sorry. You're making an impact. You baptize this many people. God's working in these ways, and so we're excited to come alongside all of them.
Yeah, I'm curious. We've come along a lot of partners over the years. Can you just share some of the things we've seen God do through the Hold the Rope offering?
Well, I'd have to think back over all the years. The first person that comes to my mind when you ask that question is David Parsons, who I just love in our city.
We all love. Who doesn't love David
everybody
Parsons?
loved David Parsons.
David and Kathy.
But
both.
I just think the amount of things we probably are able to most quickly and easily see it locally because they'll come back to you and they'll tell you exactly how they were able to use it, or there was an immediate need that you get to meet in Jesus' name.
Yeah.
And so I just think what you get to see with a lot of these ministries, a lot of these ministries are living paycheck to paycheck. There's no margon. There's no.
That's what it looks to go out on the mission field.
Yeah.
Times.
And I'm even saying locally being on the mission field. It's like, man, and a lot of times, man, if I can't remember, you'd probably remember better than I would, but David Parsons had did he want to get a school bus, was it?
He needed a bus.
That's it.
Gospel. Oh, it had a name. I wrote an article
and he would
about it.
he did donuts on the didn't he do donuts or something like that? He or Bojangles on the he had food, and he had and that's what's so amazing. A lot of our local partners, they have such creative ideas, and they're right on the front
I think it
lines.
was Bojangle biscuits, and they would just hang out and have biscuits and chat. Yeah, that's sweet.
So anyway, we've over the years, I can't remember all the stories right now, but we've been able to see people get into buildings. We've been able to see people buy the resources they need. We've been able to see people meet some needs in their families. Some of these missionaries, they just needed a couple different things to help their because part of what we want to do especially for our missionaries, it's we want to help. They're never asking for anything ridiculous. We just want to help your family flourish. Part of the generous giving sometimes is guys, we want to give you a couple things so that you can do what you're doing. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to do ministry. Then it's hard to do ministry overseas. Then it's hard to do ministry overseas with a family. So if we can help you guys to have what I like to call a sustainable sacrifice over time, then we're all in.
Well, and I just think categorically some of the things that we've been able to come along and support, all these amazing pregnancy support centers across the tribe that we're able to work with that are not only helping people see another option and path to abortion, but they're sharing the gospel in the process. And, we've heard stories of how the Lord has used that. And we have people in our church who are serving alongside them as well.
Well, that's another great point is when we identify these ministries publicly, we highlight them, we give to them. they get on people's radar.
Yeah.
We platform that ministry, and a lot of times a video comes out, someone says thank you, they connect it to leadership, and you're exactly right. Our community groups, or sometimes just individuals and families, they get reconnected, and so everything gets better. Everybody's served and helped as we do this.
And I know our partners in India as well. We can't name them here. They've shared so many stories of what they've been able to do, like places that they've been able to go in the outskirts of India that they were not of India, of the city they're in, that they wouldn't be able to reach.
I think during COVID, and maybe this was a good story to end on, but I think during COVID, I think this was what it was. We gave, I don't remember all the details, but we gave money from Hold the Rope to the group in India, and this was the group, because the people in India, the groups do like 4 or 5 different things I won't get into, but one of the groups does what's called unreached people groups. They go out into the villages, and
this is what I was trying to remember. Yeah.
And basically we gave, and one of the things that they did was, I'm going to mess the details of, but basically they bought food to bring into the villages because of COVID and all this. And again, the story is so dramatic, I can't remember all the details, but basically they end up going to this one village, and these people, and they bring them food and rice, and they meet this couple. And I don't know if you remember me, I told this story in a sermon one time. And the couple, the couple basically was ready to take their lives, and they were going to poison their kids.
Because they didn't have any more
They didn't have any food. And, through the generosity of our church, we end up getting to give this gift. They use it strategically to bring food to these people. They end up, not even in God's providence, they end up being there right before these people were about to take their lives. They're not only allowed to, this is the way the church works. They're not only meet their physical need in Jesus' name, they end up leading that family to the Lord. And so I'm like, that is, and I wish, when you asked me earlier, it's like, I wish at first I would have remembered that story right away. But yeah, there are so many stories that are untold. As Andy Davis reminded us, it's like when we get to heaven, we're going to get to hear all of the stories from the Hold the Ropes and all of the things that we had never, because we do something like, well, yeah, we'll help you get a building. And then we have no idea the hundreds of stories that come out of doing something like that. So,
and God, he uses it. I think as we're closing here, the holidays can be a time of where finances just feel really tight for families. What encouragement would you give to individuals and families who are feeling the stretch of this holiday season and just considering giving to Hold the Rope?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be very careful. I don't want to in any way manipulate anyone to give. I think we're genuinely asking for 100% participation. That's something that I mean. It's something that I would say to our staff and the leaders of our church. It's something I'd say to our whole church. I think God asks people to give what they can, not what they don't have. A couple. I think this summer I talked about. There are people who give below their means. There are people who give according to their means, and there are people who give beyond their means. And when I said in that sermon, I would never feel comfortable personally to ask anyone to give beyond their means. I think the Holy Spirit can do that on a person's life, and we've had that happen. People give sacrificially, extremely.
But that has to come from the Lord leading you there. Yeah.
But I think, man, I really mean this. I'm not just saying this. I don't want anyone to miss out. So I would say, my challenge would be, maybe there's some extreme example where this doesn't apply, but my challenge would be, could everybody in our church give something? Because I want them to be a part of it. I want them to say, when the videos come up and the stories are told and the celebrations, happen, I want them to be like, man, our family, it was a small part, but we were a part of that, and we gave something to this.
Yeah, that's great. Well, next week we're going to have the opportunity, you are, to sit down with the organization AIM.
Looking forward to it.
And Kyle, why should people tune in next week?
Well, it's going to be, I think, very, very interesting. AIM is, I've talked about them. If you've been in our church for a year or two, you know who they are. They are a powerful front lines organization that rescues young girls out of sex trafficking, does so much more than that, then disciples them, leads them to Christ, disciples them, gives them a mini mom in some ways to care for them, employs them, sends them back out. I mean, there's so much. So I think what's going to be neat is, if I remember everything correctly, next week we're going to have the CEO of AIM, and we're going to have his wife, I believe. Yes. I think we're going to have both of them on the podcast. And we're just going to hear the stories. I mean, they have stories. As we've talked today, there are stories, but I wasn't able to grab all the stories as quickly as I wanted to. I think they're going to tell stories. I want to hear how the organization started. I want to hear how, they're doing frontline stuff like putting SWAT teams to rescue girls. Yeah. They're the CEO who started it lived in Cambodia with his wife. There's so much frontlines ministry happening that I'm just excited to hear about it and to hear about how they're expanding. I believe they're doing more things in Belize. So it's going to be a special day to have them on the
Yeah.
podcast and hear about, I would generally consider one of the most frontline ministries in the world and what they're doing.
Yeah, and they're just one of our Hold the Rope partners.
right.
We can't wait over the next several weeks throughout the sermons and videos that we're sharing for you guys to see some of these churches that we're going to come alongside of. Not only that, some of the ones we've come alongside of, churches and partners before, and what God's been doing through that. And so with all of that said, we'll see you next week on Open Bible, Open Life. Again, you can listen on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, but you can also tune in on YouTube, and we hope to see you there.